safe. And then there's a series of questions about the competency of the men and women on the ship. So first, what are you doing to assure us that the organizations that review the safety of the ships actually do their job?
Ranking Member Garamendi, for starters, we wanted to see how pervasive these conditions were throughout the fleet, so I have a team out visiting what we would view to be the high-risk vessels that are enrolled in ACP, based on their age, based on their history, based on their casualties, et cetera. And the findings indicate that it is not unique to the El Faro. We have other ships out there that are in substandard condition. We have moved out to reform our oversight program. It starts with governance and having the proper people in place with the proper focus to call attention and hold others accountable. That also involves having the right policy and procedures in place, the right information management systems to capture the data, collect it, and then engage with our third parties and communicate to hold them accountable. So it's an ongoing effort. It'll take us a little time, but we have launched and we're underway and committed to rectifying the problems that we're finding.
Do you have a tracking system, a review system in place so that you know what is actually taking place as you attempt to improve your oversight?
We have a called MISSIL. It's an information management system we use for all of our marine safety activities and others. It has not been able to capture some of the information we wanted to capture, so we are making changes now to improve that system. At this time, it is difficult for our people in the field, when they do find things, to properly incorporate it into MISSIL so we can roll up all that data, all that information, and then engage with our third parties to talk to them about the problems we're finding. Changes are underway, so we'll have that capability and be able to make sure that we have the information to engage with them.
So there's a reporting system that has not worked well in the past. When your people in the field find something is amiss, just no reporting up the chain of command, and then no action by the chain of command? Is that what has happened in the past?
The procedures, the processes, the training, and the information capture all need to be improved.
Well, we're towards the end of January here, and I suppose you have a tracking system in place so that you know that there are improvements underway?
We do, sir. We are working. I have a team assembled that's working on this, and we have moved out to actually look at the ships. So I guess there's a couple efforts. One, again, is in the field, getting aboard the ships and trying to call out those requirements and raise the condition of those ships that need it. And the second thing is to actually make structural changes within our processes and our procedures and those tools we use to better enable us to conduct the proper oversight.
Just talking to our chairman and his staff, I'm going to turn this back to the chairman about a request for a matrix on exactly what you're doing in timeframes.
Which you have, which you're going to give us, right?
I can do that for you, sir.
We've already asked you for it.
Okay.
So somebody's working on it. Anybody here working on it? Who would know when it would be given to us? Okay.
Well, let me just take it up here. If you have a system in place to improve the review and oversight, not only of the work that the Coast Guard is doing, but also of the various organizations to whom you have assigned responsibility, this committee would like to have that tracking system, that matrix, that reporting program, as to exactly how you are tracking the safety programs, and then an updated report, I don't know, 6 months from now, as to how it's going. Can you do that?
Yes, sir.
Good, thank you. For the NTSB, with regard to the accident itself, your report, you have, I don't know, trying to add up the number of at least 20 or 30 different recommendations. Do you ever go back and follow up on your recommendations as to whether they're actually Done?
Yes,
Mr. Curtis?
yes, we do.
Mr. Winter?
We make these recommendations as safety recommendations to a variety of parties, but the majority in this case have gone to the Coast Guard. We send these recommendations off. We expect an acknowledgement of receipt, and then we track them from that point on. We have some expectations of how long it's going to take to get a response, but we constantly keep track of the recommendations until such time as they're closed, acceptable, in some cases closed, unacceptable, but we track them all the way through.
So your recommendations came out more than a month, almost 2 months ago now, the final version. Is that, I think that's the date. And have you had any success, or have you seen any improvement, any action on your recommendations yet? Some to the Coast Guard, some to the ship owners?
At this point in time, we would just expect to be getting an acknowledgement that they have the recommendation. At this point, we would hope that they would give us some idea of what their plan was and how long it was going to take.
It's, our role here is, one, to, with regard to the Coast Guard, to make sure they're doing their task of maritime safety. And for the NTSB, your work to report to us, Mr. Curtis, I think this is your specific responsibility. What is your time frame on following up on the recommendations, both to the shipping industry as well as to the Coast Guard? What is, you have, we just asked the Coast Guard for their matrix for review, and I'm asking you for your matrix for review, your time frame, your schedule.
Yes, sir. So as you said, the recommendations would go out as of the adoption date shortly after, once they're forwarded to the parties, and they have 90 days to make their initial response to how they respond to the recommendation, what they would do. And TOTE has implemented some changes to those recommendations. There's about 10 recommendations to TOTE. But for all parties, whether they go to the Coast Guard, TOTE, other agencies, NOAA, some to NOAA, they have 90 days for the initial response, and then we have an Office of Safety Recommendations, which corresponds directly with them on an ongoing basis, and when they get a response back from those recipients of the recommendations, they are forwarded back, and for the Marine-specific ones, back to our office to respond that we feel whether they're appropriate or not. And so we work through back to the Safety Recommendations Office and ultimately back to the recipient of the recommendation. So in this case, there were 53 recommendations, so we'll be very active and proactive in working with the Office of Safety Recommendations and the recipients.
It seems to me that the committee should be aware of this response loop that you just described. I would appreciate it if you could provide to the committee a continuous update on the progress by both the Coast Guard and the shipping industry in addressing the multiple recommendations that you have made. When might you be able to provide that update to us?
So we can provide that any time. I can work through our Office of Government Affairs to work with your folks to give you an update any period you specify. Certainly, we're available at any time to give those updates.
Okay. Do you have a specific time frame?
No.
I'm going to yield back at this point, but before I do, for me and my particular role here, the NTSB's recommendations and the response of both the Coast Guard and the shipping industry generally, or written large, is really important. And so I would appreciate it if the NTSB, towards the middle of this coming year, like maybe June, report back to us on what progress has been made, what outreach you have done to NTSB with regard to the recommendations that you have made. They're of no value unless somebody follows up on them, so I would appreciate it, Mr. Curtis and Mr. Winter, if you would do that. And similarly, the Coast Guard with regard to all of the recommendations and updating, both with regard to the recommendations as well as with regard to the improvements on the oversight of the various organizations that do the safety reviews. And with that, I yield back. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Ranking Member, quick question. Does every ship being built now have an indicator for the hatch being closed, the hatches around the ship? If they're below a certain, I don't know.
There are standards in place for newer ships that are being built. Yes, sir.
So that's in effect now. So all big ships being built, cargo ships have a little light with all the hatches that says if they're closed or open.
They have indicators as well as there's flooding detection in the hold spaces to alert them if there's water coming into that space. Yes, sir.
Thank you. I'd like to yield to the ranking member, which we're honored to have here with us.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Well, I've read a lot about this, and I really don't like systems that foster preventable tragedies that take 33 lives. Admiral, the Coast Guard subsequently looked at the sister ship, El Yunque. What was the condition of that ship?
It was in substandard condition.
And so we can assume that that El Faro was, as a sister ship, in similar substandard condition.
The Marine Board, the Coast Guard's Marine Board